so if any of you had played with dbt develop previously, dbt develop was able to, I guess, load the context of your project, and you could write code that you then could copy and paste into Atom. You know, like it was aware of refs. You could compile macros, things like that. But there wasn't really a way that you could actually build your project. It was just sort of aware of your project in the state that it existed at that point in time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Cool. So kind of the really big changes since the previous version of this interface are that now there's a file tree where you can view all the files in your project. This is the Jaffle Shop like starter project that Claire created. And so we can check out this data customers model and check out all the SQL plus Jinja in here. I set all this up frantically at the start of this call, so I'm going to press the run button, and if it doesn't work, we'll also be able to edit that in post. This should be running against Snowflake with my development credentials. Cool, this is actually a great error message. Wow, what a learning opportunity this is. So here I tried to run this model, and you can actually see if you check out the, well, it seems like a show. We tried to run this model, and the problem was one of the dependent models, raw customers here, doesn't actually exist. And so what we can do then is kick off a dbt seed job, and then this drawer pops up from the bottom of the screen, and what we'll see is that all of the resources, in this case seeds, in the project should be run in order. So we can see 3 seeds running, 3 seeds complete, and that's all done. And we'll do another dbt run here.
I wonder if it's actually going to work with the uppercase changes.
Oh yeah, we're in good shape on that front. So we're doing a dbt run. We can see it's parallelizing the run, which is cool. We've got like 8 threads cranking in the background here. So pretty much the regular dbt like experience that you're familiar with, but kind of brought to the web. So here we can check one of these things out. You can see the info level logs. This is what would have been on the command line. You can also jump in and see the details, and this is like the actual create or replace table statement. This is really convenient because if the model fails, you like sometimes have to dig through the log file to see what actually happened, and it can be a mess. This kind of contextualizes it, which is great. You can download the logs, etc. So now that we've built the project, I can actually run ad hoc queries. So in this case, I'm running a model, which is not quite so ad hoc, but we can see the compiled equivalent. Here, the ref in the source code. We can actually do these side by side here. The ref from the source code gets compiled into a database.schema.table relation, and we can check out the results of the query too. So we can see here this is what would actually be rendered out in the resulting table.
And don't worry, people always ask me this. Those are completely fake emails and names.
Cool. I mean, you don't know. Maybe it's.
I mean, there's a good chance that one of them's going to match someone's real email. But.
Yeah. So the other thing you can do here is kind of the development flow. So if you want to make a new model, you just imagine, you wouldn't actually do this in practice, but you can imagine selecting from a ref. So we'll say stage customers. We can, let me turn that off. We can run this thing, and we should get a result back. Cool. Oh, there's 100 records. Really compelling. We can see again, there's the compiled SQL. And so this really fixes the problem in the existing dbt workflow, which is that you write your code in Atom or VS Code or for me Vim, but you can't actually run it there. So if you like are capable of taking that code, getting the compiled results, pasting them into DataGrip or SQL Workbench or Post2Go, whatever, tweaking your query and then decompiling it back to Jinja, like this is kind of doing all that for you in the browser is the big idea. So we touched on running ad hoc SQL. You can, of course, edit models. So one of the cool things you can do here is I'm going to introduce a syntax error. This is a compilation problem. You can see the compilation error directly like in this status bar. And in fact, if there were more details we wanted to see, we could pop in and check out exactly what happened. We can fix that issue, and just by saving, dbt is going to recompile the project in the background. So this was a really cool thing we added in the newest release of dbt. It's 0.15.0 coming out. The goal is tomorrow, but we talk about that more later. It might be Monday. We'll see. There is something called partial parsing now built into open source dbt core that expedites parsing. It will only reparse changed files. So if you ever find that you type dbt run, press enter, and then have to wait like 10 seconds, that time should go down drastically for everything but the first compilation that occurs. So we're leveraging that here in the IDE as well. And last, and the part that I'm most worried about, because I don't think I set up my deploy key correctly at the start of this call, was that you can do a branching flow. So I can say fix the things and create a new branch. And then this is the part where you cross your fingers. Let's see how this goes. Cool, and now I'm in a branch called fix the things. And so I can actually go ahead and, I mean, Claire, I hope you don't mind, can I mess up your repository a little bit? Let's say cool as order type. It's a cool order. So we can go ahead and save this, and then we can commit our change. So this commit will update the order type to cool. Great, we'll commit that. And hopefully, GitHub, Jaffle shop, let's see. When the commit finishes, good. If we go to the Jaffle shop repo, we should see that there's a branch called fix the things. And from here, you can open up a pull request and assign it to your colleagues. And in the very near term future, you'll be able to open that PR directly from this interface. So we support like a pretty simple but straightforward Git branching flow. You can make branches, commit, revert, and currently you can merge to master, but that will be primarily replaced by open PR, I think, in the coming weeks. Other really important things to talk about here is there's a dark mode. Turn the lights off on that. We're gonna work on this bar here. I don't know if Matt is still on the call, but we're gonna fix this. What else? And it looks super slick when you're in like, it's kind of cool, right? Cool, so we're really excited about this. The big idea here again is bringing dbt to the people. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, but I can pull that back up if anyone wants to see more. There are a ton of folks that can benefit from the dbt workflow and bring that to their organization, but they might not have the former experience with like Git and Bash and pip and so on, or they're on Windows or similar. And so this gives you the same workflow, but in the web browser. The really great thing about this is that you can have a team of people where some people are on the command line and some folks are on the web, or you can use both yourself. This is currently available on the free tier on dbt Cloud as well. So we very much encourage everyone to at least try it out. And if you have feedback, I'd certainly love to hear it. We've already gotten a number of things that we're going to touch up over the next couple of days and weeks. So I guess at this point, if anyone has any questions about the IDE or things they're excited to do with the IDE or things that the IDE makes them think about or 015.0, we would love to talk about that.
I got a question. This is really cool. I really like the improvements to the overall workflow. Like I've struggled with the converting to Jinja and then back again. Is it possible to run this, off of code that you have locally, or is it strictly like the only way to move code around is through GitHub, or can the interface be run locally too, or is it strictly in the cloud? Yeah, so right now it's strictly in the cloud. This is something we've thought a lot about. The core like data transformation and database connectivity logic lives entirely in open source dbt core. What's going to continue to live in dbt Cloud is like user interfaces around that. So I think there are things that we're going to build here, and I don't want to write checks that I can't cash, but you can imagine, like, we want to build a linter for this. I apologize for even saying that, but we're going to build a linter for this. That will be like open source, and if people want to make like Atom and VS Code plugins and things like that, you can certainly do it. But the core interface itself, like, there's a Postgres database that backs this thing. There's a non-trivial amount of like Kubernetes pods that we're running right now. Those aren't things that we're going to open source. They're going to continue to live in the hosted dbt Cloud environment. But it's important to us that like very accessible to folks, so we're going to continue to like price it pretty aggressively so everyone can use it if they want to. Cool.
Does it only work with GitHub? I'm sorry, wait. Your face is covered by Zoom image. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, no problem. Does it only work with GitHub? Was asked on Zoom chat. So it works very well with GitHub. It also works with every Git provider out there that speaks the like Git SSH protocol. So you can set up what's called the deploy key, and in all these different services, GitLab, Bitbucket, VSTS, similar. You can create a deploy key or add an SSH key to your user account, kind of like if anyone here uses Looker, I think that's how Looker sometimes does this. As long as it has read and write access to your repository, if you set that up in the dbt cloud repository, the IDE will be able to pull, push, commit, etc. So yeah, any Git provider, yeah, try it out with GitLab. Give us some feedback. I think I've tried this out with GitLab, and I think someone else I talked to has done that too with success. So let us know how it goes.
We've been trying with Bitbucket, so.
Is it working okay with Bitbucket?
Yeah. I mean, I still, when the time's appropriate, I still have some questions kind of about how I was trying to do some things like, I would go in the GUI and then I'd realize I had some local code and I wanted to push the branch up, but I'd created so I had to push it up, but then I couldn't figure out how to get the list of branches to refresh.
Yeah.
Like all that kind of stuff that I don't quite, but I don't know if that's like a Bitbucket thing or if that's just, maybe I'm not understanding the general intuition, right?
Sure. Yeah, well, this is in the like open beta over the next about 6 weeks. We're going to focus really hard on a lot of these like narrower but important use cases. So things like refreshing the list of Git branches, or here's another one. If you change your credentials, say you update your password, you want to go change it, you have to actually like restart this server to get your new credentials to be supplied in the dbt server, which is also open source. So there's a ton of stuff like that that isn't immediately obvious that you need when you start using this initially, but it's important if you want to actually like depend on this for production or like development workloads. But we're going to fix all those issues. So certainly if you have problems like that, we would love to hear them. Or in fact, you can send them to me directly.
So related to that, do you guys support toggling between profiles? Apologies if I missed that part at the beginning.
That's a good question. When you ask that, what are you looking for in particular?
I'm thinking specifically like testing on multiple environments. Like I might want to render it as if like you showed the SQL preview on the right-hand side, like SQL preview on one platform might be a different SQL preview on another platform based on namespaces and such.
Sure.
And yeah.
Like BigQuery versus Snowflake, you mean like?
Yeah, like Snowflake versus Spark is what I'm thinking personally. Yeah.
So our thinking there is that, you know, right now there are projects in dbt Cloud and the projects have connections. And so what you'd actually want to do here is create a new project. And in that project, you could create a Spark connection versus a Redshift or whatever it is connection. And then configure credentials for each of those separately. And you could point to the same repo in each of them, for instance. But yeah, you would at the present time need 2 different projects to do that.
Okay. All right.
We have another question in the Zoom chat. When does it reread from the source Git repository? For example, if changes are pushed to the branch from outside, when would the cloud pick them up? So, good question. When you do Git actions, we will fetch the status from, well, I won't do it. The dbt IDE will fetch the status from the remote branch. The primary Git action will change from something like, at present it says merge to master if you're ahead. If you like somehow become behind, it'll change to pull from remote. So it'll kind of update automatically as you do Git actions. The one place where this is kind of funny is like, you can in fact get into problems if you're working on a branch, somebody else pushes to that branch and then like your changes are incompatible. You're now in like merge conflict mode, and it's very possible to resolve this in the UI, but generally like if you can avoid that, it's better. And so my recommendation there would be like, try to use a Git branching flow which prevents you from being in those particular situations. Like make feature and fix branches. And if you want to push to those things and you're able to manage the changes like from your command line versus from the IDE, that's great. But like don't have different folks contributing different changes to the same branch, as you can get into trouble like pretty quickly. But one other very quick thing to say here is the IDE uses a text editor called Monaco, which is open sourced by Microsoft. Who is cool now, Microsoft. And it has built-in like really good capabilities around Git diffing, merge conflict resolution, and some other cool Git things like that. And we're really excited to leverage them here. So I actually think this could do a really great job of helping you resolve like merge conflicts at some point in the future. Okay, a couple more questions. I may have missed this, but is there autocomplete? We had a hackathon last week, and Kyle, who might be on this call, did some really cool work around building a grammar for like dbt Jinja code. And so it's actually like very, very difficult to do this well, and Kyle did a great job. This kind of does two things. One is it will help us autocomplete when you start typing ref, it can fill in like model names for you. That'll be really cool. Similarly, Claire did some great work on the
Snippets?
yeah, snippets. Do you have a repo for that?
We have an atom repo, but it's like a very similar concept
Sure.
to VS Code, which is
Totally. So very similarly to the like Git view, this Monaco editor we have, we're using supports like autocomplete, snippets, things like that. We can totally build integrations for all these things. Such that when you start typing for, it like fills in the for loop syntax for you, things like that. That'll be really cool. The other great thing that I hope it's okay if I tease is like you'll be able to at some point in the future like control click one of these ref statements and jump to the corresponding model. That's something we can do here too, which would be really cool. And I mean, this is being recorded, so I shouldn't, but like you can imagine showing documentation here too inline as you start typing graphs and like building the graph out as you graph different models and traversing it that way. I think that'd be really compelling. Also, I don't want to, if anyone here is like listening and has thoughts, even like things you think would be cool and compelling, I would love to hear them as well. It doesn't need to be like strictly Q&A, I'm happy to just keep reading off the Zoom chat. Okay, Sean, follow up here. Once there's using feature branches, you might have to merge master back in your feature branch, which I'm guessing you need to do outside of dbt Cloud.
well, go to rebase.
You put a rebase? Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. So the way this works right now is if you try to merge to master, we will start by pulling master. The merge will be aborted, and it will say you are behind. You need to pull these changes. You click the pull, you get updated, and then you can complete the merge or open a pull request. There's definitely an opportunity for us to like better support that particular workflow. It's a really good point, Sean.
A silly question here. This is Terry. I work with Yertle. I'm on the dbt Cloud right now, and I don't see it. So I assume I need a developer license to get at it. And tell me how to get one from we have a standard plan right now.
Sure. You can go to your account settings and find the team page. You should find your user account there, and you can flip your license type from your standard to developer. The big idea here is that we have, for the timeline of the beta launch, we're pricing developer seats the same price as standard seats. But that is like not going to continue to be the case after early January. And so what we didn't want to do was like automatically upgrade everyone to a developer and then like in January say like, hey, here's your new price for dbt Cloud. We wanted to make sure that folks like consciously opted into it and like were able to revert back, when they find out what the new pricing will look like. So it's not going to be anything drastic. It'll look somewhat similar to the existing pricing for developer seats. We just wanted to make sure that this was accessible to folks on the free tier, and that if you do have like 5 users, say on the basic plan, all of them could at least poke around in the IDE and give us feedback. Any other quick things to say here? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just said great. That's fine.
Okay, the other quick thing to say here is that when like updated pricing does come out in the new year, it's not going to be like automatically applied to you. We'll like give everyone advance notice and work with you to make sure that your account's in good shape after that.
Hey, I had maybe a question around what did you mean by snippets when you Claire? Like, is it like, so what I'm thinking, and maybe that's what you actually were talking about, is there are a lot of cases where sometimes you write a bit of Jinja and you're not really sure like if it's gonna work. And a lot of times what I end up doing is like I open this like Heroku app somewhere on the web that like compiles Jinja, and it is like, oh, it looks like it's working. And I was thinking like, is that what snippets would be, or is there something that could be potentially thought about being included in the IDE as so to kind of again like sort of stop having to go back and forth between like some of the shit you write in your IDE and some outside or something like that.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, to answer the first question of what is a snippet, this thing is to just show you. This is my snippet for this is my snippet for macro. It's just like shortcuts that I have we've opened, so those ones are all in a repo somewhere that you can install in Atom. We haven't ported over to VS Code, and we really should, because everyone's telling me that VS Code is better than Atom. So those are the snippets that we're talking about in that context.
Okay, I got it.
It's a good question though. Can I share my screen here?
Yeah, let me stop share.
Yeah. And I want to share screen, and I want to punch in.
I definitely totally want the snippets on VS Code. That would be so much better there.
So, okay, if everyone can see my screen again, what you can do here is type out a macro very slowly and manually. My macro, for instance, and macro, and you can put in like whatever Jinja logic you want here. So, I mean, the canonical example is, in fact, this guy is maybe the best place to look. You can just type in whatever Jinja you want. If it evaluates to a select statement, you can see the compiled output. And this is where like the side-by-side view is really helpful. You can see exactly what your source code compiles to. And so you can call things like dbt adapter functions, and you can query your database, like get columns in table, like things like that. Or otherwise, right, pretty complex Jinja SQL here. So yeah, this is like a statement. This isn't a file that I created. I can't save this. It's kind of like an ad hoc query that I can play around in and just close whenever I'm done with it. Cool.
Yeah, we were at some point, we were like, shit, we need to write some sort of plugin for VS Code to like do that kind of stuff, where you can just like compile outside of the whole file if you're writing something. But yeah, like
sure.
So, yeah. I
mean, one of the cool things that when we talk about the IDE, it's frequently not the right like level of abstraction to talk about what's happening in the background, but I think it's actually pretty fascinating. We built a dbt server that when it starts up, it'll load your project into memory. And the reason we did that is it means that you can submit arbitrary like Jinja SQL statements. You can say, please compile this, or please run this for me. And the server can just compile that one node instead of recompiling the entire project. And that's how, like, even if your project takes, say, a minute to compile, it's incredibly slow. You have 10,000 models and tests. You can still like compile and run a single statement very quickly with this new kind of paradigm. And then the dbt server is open source. It's an 0.15.0. You can use it for other applications too, which I think is really cool.
I just want to say that editor and compiler and Jinja compiler, that's really cool. As a developer, like we're pretty comfortable like running dbt locally, but like just being able to have that kind of editor, like I think we'd be willing to like pay for a seat to have an editor, even if we're not using even we're not running all this stuff on dbt cloud.
Sure.
That would be something we'd be interested in as well.
Yeah, and I want to echo that too. So in the consulting sphere as well, like we don't necessarily know who's going to get assigned to a project, and not everybody's going to be like hitting the ground running with something like this from day one. So to have like that ability to preview a Jinja or like compile and make sure that it actually is working, take some existing stuff, copy paste it, and just like quickly like, even if somebody hasn't worked with it before, to like do the trial and error, because like I'm new to it and I'm figuring it out, but like it's a lot of trial and error, and a lot the turnaround cycles are pretty expensive.
Yeah.
So I like the idea of having that real time. I think it'll speed it up and open up to people who otherwise would be intimidated or turned off by the platform.
Totally.
Yeah, like I was rewriting some documentation recently. It's like taking one of our articles and made it more into like a tutorial style, and it's like if you're on the command line, like open this file, have that file next to it, have your example, and I was just like, I'm so glad that there's a different way to do this.
It actually reminds me of the Markdown preview feature in VS Code, where you have on the left-hand side your Markdown, on the right-hand side like real-time rendering.
Sure.
Yeah, if anybody wants to code that, I'd love to use it.
Well, you know what?
But
the really cool thing to say here is we just did the beta launch. This is the version that does the regular dbt things that we're familiar with in the command line. But the thing that I'm excited about going forwards is like taking all the dbt constructs and manifesting them in like a more web native way. So right now, if you want to add tests to a model, you have to make a YAML file, and it's a lot of tabs. You can certainly do it. There's certainly benefits to that, but there are also other ways of representing it back to the user, right? So you can imagine that when you make a model here, when you're doing a model in this IDE, you can have like a list of columns that we've like inferred from your query results, and you can just check like unique, not null, unique, foreign key to this thing. Make it in fact easier to do the best practices. Or one step further, maybe set up rules where you say like enforce that every model has a primary key, like unique, not null constraint on it, and warn you if you don't do that when you create a new model. So I think there are ways to in fact help folks that are new to this experience operate in like the best practices ways, like easier than in fact in the dbt like core command line flow. So,
oh, sorry to interrupt there. Do you guys, Drew, Claire, do you guys also see it? I mean, the first case is obviously editing SQL, but is it also intended like, yeah, you can edit your YAML files, you can edit your dbt project YAML, you can do all that stuff too?
sure.
Yeah, you can in fact already do that. I was playing around with this yesterday, 2 days ago, and I needed to import a package and was able to like add a packages.yaml file and run dbt deps really quickly, and then use a utils macro and actually see what it was doing rather than like just sort of copy pasting the utils macro and hoping that it ran so I could see the compiler. So yeah, that's already like we've shown the editing SQL file, but editing YAML is also supported.
The other cool thing that's possible here, but not currently represented in the UI, is you can generate documentation from this, and I don't see any reason why we can't add a button that says like view the docs. And kind of the way this works behind the scenes, every time you edit a YAML file or a model file or whatever it is and press save, the server's going to recompile your project really quickly, and the docs will like live update on your next refresh. So yeah, documentation, YAML, constraints, dbt project configs, things like that. Okay, I do want to get to some more of the questions from the Zoom chat. There's one here for CI on dbt collaborating on Snowflake. Any plans to make use of zero-copy cloning for the temporary test environments for pull requests? What a good question. Brandon with the +1. Sterling, this is a Vim shop we got here, so I got bad news. Okay, let's talk, yeah, quickly on the CI topic. I think this is like kind of at the point where I've had this conversation with other folks about zero-copy clones and PRs. I think there's a really good way for us to do this. There's kind of one outstanding problem. It will be a fascinating conversation for the Snowflake users amongst us, but it might be a bit of a tangent for those who are not. So let's follow up on Slack. I'll post maybe in the office hours channel, and we can like follow up on this particular conversation. My very short answer is yes, there's I think a very good way to do this. We just need to solve one more problem around how dbt creates views. But yeah, zero-copy clones on PR is totally doable. Oh, actually, that's very doable right now. The thing I was thinking about was blue-green deployments, which is, we can also talk about that. So yes, I think we're in very good shape to do that. I would love to do it. I think it's a great idea. Okay, a couple more. When will it be possible that operations of the DAG operate, orchestrate models and operations? Okay, this is something near and dear to my and Josh Andrews' hearts. We talked about this in the last office hours that I was a member of anyway, if I'm not mistaken. This is something that I want to prioritize for like an early 2020 release. Like the thinking for us is that we're launching 0.15.0 imminently. 0.15.1 is going to fix any of the bugs that might crop up in 0.15.0 that we can find out about. 0.15.2 is going to be about orchestration and some other stuff too. Orchestration and performance. And so when I say orchestration, that means things like you can version control a sort of job definition. You can say, I want to run these steps configured with these flags and maybe these extra configs, something like that. Run these operations, etc. This is actually very much what I'm thinking around zero-copy clones for pull requests, where your first step can be like, clone my database, configure my models to use this schema, something like that. You could very easily orchestrate that or something more complicated than that, like a blue-green deployment in user space. So yes, that's coming soon. I'm very excited about it. To be very honest with all of you, I think it's a little bit overdue. So I'm excited to get there.
That's something you could like fake right now with like a good use of macros, but you want to make that easier. Is that the idea?
Yeah. The problem I think is that you put them in the on-run start hooks, and really like I want those to kind of go away and for us to have more job-dependent hooks. So right now, when you run dbt development, your on-run end hooks might say like, grant usage on this to like many different roles. Maybe you don't need to do that in development. Or another example, just say you want to vacuum a table at the end of the run or something like that. Maybe that's true in prod, but not dev, or who knows. Being able to, on a kind of per job definition basis, say, here's what you should do before I start running models. Here are the models to run, and seeds and tests, et cetera, snapshots. At the very end, like, here's how you finalize the run. Version control that, and some sort of probably YAML file. That feels like pretty good to me. But yes, you can do it currently. It would just be like a lot of hooks that have if target equals dev, do this, otherwise do that. Kind of like a mess.
Or you can just kind of hack it together through like your own bash script, or like kind of meta wrapping at something outside dbt, right? Which is not elegant, but yeah.
Sure.
And I actually had one other thought on that, Drew, that sounds like you're already thinking about this, but I realized like it's not just going to be one job per dbt project. It's very possible that one dbt project you might have 5 or 2 or 6 different jobs.
Totally.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I want to run some models. Sometimes I just want to run a macro and then snapshots. Sometimes I want to do everything. Sometimes,
sure.
You know.
Yeah.
So, I mean, additionally, at the risk of getting maybe a little bit sidetracked, I'm happy to talk about this like very much more in depth. Let's do more upstairs. Yes, the other thing we're thinking about here is that there are a lot of teams that have maybe 2 layers of dbt projects where they have like a core kind of almost data engineering managed project that maps source data, cleans up PII, things like that, like does initial aggregation, right? And then they pass this over to like kind of the last mile project that's more analyst run. And the problem is, well, what you can do is import the base package from the sub package. The problem is when you do a dbt run in the sub package, it also runs the base package's models. And so you could set up a sort of a default dev run for maybe the sub package that only runs models in a specific package. You can say, here's when I type dbt run, what I want to happen. The default is run all the models in the project and all projects, you know, but you can configure that. Cool. And that'll be a part of this too, the orchestration thing, hopefully. I'm excited about that. Banin, no, I'm gonna stop talking. I'm gonna stop writing the checks. But I think this is a really compelling conversation for sure. All right, what else are people thinking about here?
Sure, I think there's a really cool issue open about the last thing you just mentioned.
Yeah, do you remember who opened that one, Jeremy?
Someone really awesome.
Yeah.
Was it Jeremy?
Was it Josh Andrews? No, it was Jeremy Cohen. Yeah, it's Jeremy Cohen.
Yeah, no, it's Josh.
Yeah, it's a good one.
I have no context of what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's very good.
Can you drop it in the chat, Jeremy, so we can follow?
F's in the chat.
Cool. So question in the chat, would a self-hosted / on-prem option be considered at some point?
We've got great news for you. dbt Cloud is currently available on premises in your VPC. So yeah, get in touch. You can ping me or support at getdbt.com or similar. Love to talk about that. All right, main value props of the IDE over dbt traditionnel in a few sentences. I'm not capable of saying anything in a few sentences. I'm not a rambler. Yeah, the goal here is to change the, well, really to expand the segment of people that can use dbt. We've identified that there are lots of people that have the core data transformation and business understanding skills required to build out these databases with dbt and bring all the benefits of dbt to the rest of the organization. But either they lack the assistance of data engineers, like they can set up Airflow, things like that, to deploy it. That's sort of a dbt cloud thing. Or they lack the ability to even get started with it. They open up the introduction for a long time. Step 1 was pip install dbt, and that's kind of a non-starter. I get 3 intercom messages a day from folks that say, I'm trying to install dbt on Windows and it's not working. Can you help me? It's hard. It's not. We got to rewrite dbt in a different language like Go or something to solve that problem. And so, in fact, the better answer, you said a couple sentences, and we want to make it more accessible to these people. They will need strong SQL skills. They will need to be able to think like software engineers and develop skills like that. They will not need to develop Bash and Git command line skills and understand deeply their home directories to use dbt. I think that's a net positive. Worth saying, I think both workflows are great. We're going to continue to invest in both of them. I know even on our team, some of us are going to use the IDE. Some of us have like tricked out her like Atom environment with snippets that don't currently exist yet. I want to make the IDE as compelling as her Atom environment. But the two work very well together. I think there's nothing wrong with that.
So, can I jump in, or are we going through the chat?
No, yeah,
Jump in,
hop on in.
Okay. So along those lines of like getting to these other users who might get intimidated, but like they're good with SQL. And I put this in Slack like the first week I started working with dbt. Like if you guys thought or anybody played around, I think somebody said during a migration project, but like I would love to be able to tell users they can either paste in a working query and we'll like infer the references and like gingitize it, or just like even without gingitizing it, like at least like detect references of one SQL file to another SQL file and order them correctly so that they run in the right. I mean, even if it's not a dynamic reference. Anyway, what are your thoughts on that? In one or two sentences alone, yeah.
Internally in our own thread, Tristan, the CEO, said, "This is the biggest release to dbt since ref," and I replied, "Wait, we didn't have ref at some point." So there was a time in which we did parse SQL, and I can't talk much more about that because I didn't even know about it.
Yeah, a fun fact from the dbt history books is that, and actually the dbt current books, we do a little bit of SQL parsing in a really surprising place, but not around the SQL like table names.
So I know it's possible because I've done it on like before I heard about dbt, like using RayX to like find something that's in a from clause that's like between like or in an inner join. Like you can do it with some clever RayX, and I don't know. I'm just
it's I actually really like the way that you're thinking about it. I would hesitate to make that how dbt works. Like you just, okay, the really good thing about the ref function is that it's environmentally switchable. You know, in production it evaluates to the prod schema, and dev it evaluates your dev schema. That doesn't work if you hard-code a table name. That's not what you're saying though. You're saying I want to take like SQL that someone else wrote and help automatically convert it into
maybe one way to think of it is like pasting it into the right hand of that screen, like, and, like I mean that's maybe a little ambitious, but like that's how I'm thinking of it. I do understand the value of like of a ref, like, but I'm thinking like, hey, I've got a working SQL query and like 5 to 7 places there's a reference that's needed, but I don't want to replace that every time I copy and paste it from my query editor to here. Now, I like that you guys have made this IDE where it's almost runnable now. You maybe don't need to spend as much time in the query editor, but I don't know.
I mean, I would even love one step before that, which is like a linter that tells me when I have a reference. When we work on client projects, sometimes code sneaks in where someone made a direct table reference rather than using a source or ref. And so if I could have like a PR test that's like, hey, it looks like you made a direct table reference, which is like even one step before the like detect and replace is just the detect. So I think we're a few steps away at the moment.
But you're not against it.
I'm not against it.
I think it's reasonable. Definitely linter at some point. I don't know that we're going to do exactly that inside of the IDE as it exists today, but I wrote this post back in May, like when dbt turned 3 years old, and we talked about the ways in which dbt would need to change over the coming year, and well, years. One of them was kind of focused on the IDE and making it accessible to more people. Another one was opening up the dbt internals to extension by other tools, and that's how I think about this. Like that's a totally valid use case. I think it's not one that like I would anticipate. I'm certainly have to talk more about it, but I would anticipate like building a point solution for it. I would instead like to like build the linter that's able to detect these things, make it possible for you to extend that, and like somehow be able to apply that logic in your own environment. that would feel really great to me, because then you can do all sorts of other sort of use case specific things. And that's really like why dbt is so, I hope you'll forgive me for saying it, it's why it's so great. You can really extend the internals and like make new materializations and custom schema tests. And we're of the minds of like, we know what 80% of people want to do might be, but the last 20% totally depends on your particular needs. And we want to give you that like escape hatch to account for those too. Cool. So yeah, that feels like very squarely within our kind of worldview.
Yeah, I think another point to that is migration work is something that we have been doing more and more of in like our own consulting work. There was a period of time where we were just building net new projects, and now we're doing a lot more like as dbt is gaining traction and people are going, okay, I rolled my own thing, I need to replace it with something that has over 1,000 companies using it each week. We're doing a lot more migration work, so interested to learn, like we're learning how to best do migration work as well. So things like audit queries were like a thing I never had to deal with before, and I've gone very deep on audit queries recently. So yeah, if you have any other tips for like how to do migrations, I'd love to hear them, because I think that's going to be like some of the newer projects that we have over the next year will be a lot more of that flavor.
I'm just thinking, like, while you're auto-referring refs, why not just say, hey, you have a string repeated a bunch of times. Shouldn't that be a variable? You have magic numbers, magic dates. You have magic, like, feed me SQL and I will, like, gingify the whole thing, right? Like,
sure.
While we're thinking blue sky, right? Like,
I literally just wrote in the docs yesterday a piece that we're written a new doc for using Ginger, and the like last hot tip is like, it's like once you learn how Ginger works, you're probably going to want to use too much Ginger. So like, don't use too much Ginger.
Don't be clever, right? Don't be. It's like you read some guy's crazy Perl thing that was right only. Only the person who wrote it understands it.
Yeah.
It's like the way that you get Slack to work without the auto format. It's so simple.
Okay, we're getting off track here.
I used to office hours like 5.
So what is an incremental way to get there? Would it be like running some kind of logic and exporting it into the docs as like warnings? Is that like a way to like test that out without breaking anybody? I'm trying to think of like where's the point, because I think there's two things. One is, can we detect and replace them with refs, like when there's an object or something, or other practices where like refs are used or shouldn't have been used or used slightly differently. Like, is there currently any kind of warnings thing that we could output to, or would it make sense to put that in the docs?
Sure. So yeah, dbt currently doesn't do really any of that. We faithfully pass along whatever SQL is in your models or otherwise it's generated to your database. I think step one is going to be like making a place where the post-processing can happen. I think probably the entry point here is the linter, where we at least detect these things. I think detecting direct references to tables is a really great place to start. Like that's easier even than white space formatting, or like that's actually a really challenging problem in its own right, especially with how many opinions people have about how to work. So yeah, like it's very reasonable, I think, in a dbt project to say, if you point to schema.table, that is an error, you shouldn't commit that in a dbt project. Use a source or a model instead. We can start there. I think that it'll probably be like a warning when you do the run. We have a good place we have a couple good places in the UI to expose these warnings. There are flags to dbt to make the warnings manifest as errors. And I think that from there, once we have the information, we can better expose it, say, in the documentation or like natively in the editor. You can like highlight it and say like, things like VS Code or Atom do this very well, where we'll highlight the file and say like, there are like linting issues that you need to address. And I think that there's no reason why we couldn't do something similar with these. I was hoping to have a nice, relaxing Thanksgiving weekend, but I think now I'm gonna be building a linter.
Please take a break. Cool. Any other questions?
How is from your perspective, how has the release candidate process been going for .15? Any surprises show up? Anything unexpected? Is it pretty smooth? Yeah.
It's a great question. We're very close. were a couple, like, admittedly pretty minor issues that we thought we fixed. It turns out we didn't fix the whole problem. We went back and Jake, my colleague, fixed, I think, both of those today. They're on beta review. There is one other question that I think we need to get sorted, and it has to do with the version of Psycho PG2 that we use. It's the dependency that we use to connect to Postgres at Redshift. And I want to spend some more time verifying that we're doing exactly the right thing there. I've seen a couple reports in Slack of people not being able to install dbt because of this updated version that we're using. But we did update it for a good reason. I think there were issues with the previous version as well. And so I just want to make sure that we're doing like the best possible thing there. As really like worst case for the RC is we launch it, we're really excited about it, and no one can install it. Well, that's the second worst case. The worst case is you install it and it looks like it works, but it doesn't. That's always the worst case. So we want to make sure that's in good shape. We were really excited to launch 0.15.0. In fact, it's supposed to be on Tuesday. But with this kind of thing, I'd rather take our time and make sure that it's like super stable and ready to roll when we put it out in the world. So if it's not ready by tomorrow, it'll be Monday. But largely, the RC process is going great. We caught a number of bugs. I'm sorry, you all caught a number of bugs and told us about them in the RC process, which is very much why we do it. So if you did test, thank you very much for helping out. We appreciate it.
Yeah, maybe I have something to. I was kind of surprised, like pleasantly, to hear about like only compiling stuff has changed and all of that stuff. And you were saying that's also like part of like the non-cloud stuff, like that. Where should I be looking to learn a bit more about this? Because we are trying now to like schedule deploys more oriented stuff on like, okay, this file has been modified. We need to run a full refresh, but that's not run everything. And kind of like that logic is really interesting. So I think I'd be kind of interested to know more about it and then maybe where I could find out more information.
Okay, so I have two things to say about that. One is I'm wrapping up the documentation for 0.15.0 presently, and information about this is called partial parsing will be included in the docs. We'll explain kind of how it works. It's something you have to turn on manually, either with a command line flag or your profile. As I noted before, the worst case scenario is always it looks like it works and it's doing the wrong thing. And here, because we're not parsing the file directly, we're relying on the previous version. If there's some sort of cache issue, it could, one failure mode of this partial parse functionality is that we say we're running the code that you've saved, but we actually run the previous version of the code. And so we've done a lot of work to verify that that's not the case, but for the moment, for the first release, you have to opt into it in core. Now, the second thing I want to say is you identified an issue around like full refreshing models that are incremental, either when, like say when the scheme has changed or if the logic's changed. We have a separate open issue, and I think we will probably address that differently. Happy to post that. Let me make a note. Or yeah, I'll post in the ops hours thread. We can follow up on that like in line. That's really great too. I'm excited for that as well. There's a lot of changes that are going to come around full refresh, I think, that are just minor quality of life improvements.
Cool, thanks.
No problem.
Cool. Fabrice, do you think an Oracle adapter could spread dbt's adoption in big corporations that are not cloud-minded yet?
Okay, what a good question. The way that we're best able to build plugins for dbt is by having access to these databases and a like production use case. And so, to anyone who doesn't know, dbt is made by our company Fishtown Analytics. We offer analytics consulting services, and sometimes clients come to us and they say, "This very much happened. There's this new cool database called Snowflake. We would love to have a dbt plugin for it. Any chance you can make that happen?" That's how we built Snowflake and how we built BigQuery. And the Spark SQL plugin, Presto one, is a similar story. And so on the Oracle front, I think the problem that we have is not like an appetite for it. I would love to bring the dbt gospel to all the Oracle users as well. It's that we really don't know what it looks like to do analytics on Oracle. There's like a lot of, I've never used Oracle before personally. I think there's a lot that I should know that I don't know about and similar that whole class of
You
databases.
say you're not an Oracle.
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 So yeah, I think a dbt plugin for Oracle would be a great idea. The plugin architecture for dbt is pretty well documented at present. There's certainly more that we can do there too. And if anyone has like the use case and an appetite for it, we're like always super happy to help. In the past maybe 3 months, there were some new plugins created for Microsoft SQL Server, Azure Data Warehouse, and a couple others too. So you can very much build these things yourself, and they fit right into dbt, which is pretty great. If that answers your question.
Okay.
Well, thanks for joining, everyone. The conversation doesn't need to end here. If you want to follow up on any of this stuff, where's a good place to continue the conversation?
Office hours channel is pretty good. So Matt and Kyle are on this call. Massive thank you for their hard work over the last few months in building this. I'm excited for them. Hey Matt. I'm excited for them to meet some of you in real life at some meetups and different events that we'll be at as well. So yeah, it feels good to at least have them on the call today and get to see that people are interested in the work that we've done. So thanks very much, everyone, for joining us and for all of your amazing questions today.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you all. Bye-bye. Good job, Joe.
Thanks, everyone.